First, I was going to talk about the Washington Wizards. The one argument I keep making to friends and those of you who talk sports with me at the nightclub I work at or when you see me on the street, the one thing I keep talking to you all about is why the NBA, in my opinion, locked the players out. And I will tell you the reason why the NBA started to fail was that many of these NBA teams fell in love with these 18-year-old and 19-year-old players from college and thought they could build franchises around them. And once they discovered that they couldn't, they either lost the player to another team or they start crying they have no money because basically the experiments have failed. So, my prime example is now the Washington Wizards. John Wall and Kwame Brown were both drafted by the Washington Wizards. Kwame Brown has been on, what, 6 different teams in the last 7, 8 years since he left high school. John Wall currently is on the Washington Wizards. Maybe one of the worst teams I've ever seen play in the NBA. He's been playing horribly. And as I say that, Washington is beating the Knicks 32-18 in the first quarter because the Knicks don't play defense and the Knicks flat out stink. But other than that, we'll talk about the Knicks another time. But the point that I was making to all those lockout people was that all these teams drafting all these players who were supposed to be the faces of the franchises, faces of the league, were supposed to change the league, turn the league over, and do all these wonderful things. When they don't do it, these teams suffer financially. And Washington right now don't have any fans that come to the games unless, LeBron comes to town or Carmelo, who's from the DC area, comes to town. It's an absolute travesty and a tragedy. The second team is the Sacramento Kings. I talk a lot about the Sacramento Kings and how they wanted to move to LA last year. But the Maloofs promised the fan base up there that they wouldn't take him out if the fans supported. So what happens? Fans do come out, they get big crowds every night, and now it's up to them to put a product on the floor. Well, they don't have a product to put on the floor. They have good players. They have a lot of the same players. What I mean by same players is they have a lot of guys who can play the same position. This year's team, well, they fired Paul Westphal yesterday. Now, what's crazy about that to me is that Paul Westphal, I believe as a player, won a championship. I believe he played in a championship as a player. He coached in the NBA championship with Phoenix, with Charles Barkley and that crew. And Paul Westphal is an easygoing guy, West Coast guy, doesn't curse, doesn't raise his voice unless he has to. Mr. Cousins needs to get into line. And as I tweeted yesterday, when you let the inmates run the asylum, this is what happens. DeMarcus Cousins has a lot of talent. He's a double-double every night. But he takes a lot of bad shots, and he's a head case. And I'm not trying to say it is a parallel because they both played for Kentucky. They both played for Coach Calipari. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is you put all this money, you put all your eggs in this basket with these young players who are unproven, and this is what you get. You get a mediocre, poor team that nobody wants to support, that eventually you're going to end up trading to another team, and eventually he may pan out another team, you never know, or he might be out of the league, and all those years of money that you wasted are gone. Yes, Keith Smart deserves another chance to be a head coach, but he doesn't deserve this chance to be coaching the Sacramento Kings. And the NBA, to me, it's just TV noise. I watch it because I had nothing else to do. Obviously, I have a sports radio show. I like watching certain players play, but you can see why the owners are complaining and moaning about losing money and losing a whole bunch of stuff because basically they put their investments in these young talented players who don't have talent and these supposed upside players who supposedly going to change the face of the franchise and the luck of the franchise, and they're unproven, and therefore they lose. Now this Penn State fiasco. Bill O'Brien. Every time they say Bill O'Brien's name, I keep thinking they're going to say Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Brien is the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. His claim to fame right now in the NFL is that he spoke up against Tom Brady and that the Patriots were the highest scoring team in the AFC. Okay? That's it. He coached, I believe, 1 year at the University of Maryland as an offensive coordinator. And it's not as if Maryland won the national championship. He has no ties to Penn State whatsoever. So a lot of the Penn State people are upset because they want a Penn State guy in there. Not Joe Paterno's fault that Jerry Sandusky did what he supposedly did. They're mad at Joe Paterno because he didn't kick Sandusky off campus. And a lot of people think that Penn State's trying to distance themselves from having people affiliated with the program, affiliated with Jerry Sandusky, and affiliated with Joe Paterno. However, there are hundreds, thousands of men and women who are all angry at the fact that they're not mad at, Penn State per se for hiring Mr. O'Brien because Mr. O'Brien can't coach. They're mad because people feel there's nothing wrong with being mentored and coached by Joe Paterno. And therefore, a lot of people think that hiring somebody who is not a Penn State guy is basically saying that they're eschewing Joe Paterno's values and coaching methods from the school. LeVar Arrington went nuts today on Twitter, going off about how he's no longer a Penn State guy anymore. Some of the other players have done the same thing. Matt Millen basically said, look, nothing I can do about it. All I can do is support the school. And that's the attitude that most people want other former players to have. Just support the school. You guys can help rebuild the program as well. No one's trying to push you all away from the program. They just don't want anyone leading people in the program who was a part of the Paterno-Sandusky reign. My opinion is simply this. Joe Paterno is a god in Penn State, is a god in Happy Valley. There are thousands of people who've learned a lot about life because of Joe Paterno. Penn State is not, Cal State Fullerton, or it's not, Los Angeles City College, where basically they don't have a legacy or footing in the national pantheon of sports. Now, if Urban Meyer got hired at Penn State, no one would say a word. If Lloyd Carr, I don't know, somebody who's got a name, Lou Holtz got hired at Penn State, no one would say a word. But the fact that it's just some guy who doesn't have any kind of pedigree, that's the only reason why anyone's saying anything. Do I think Penn State needs to hire a Penn State guy? Maybe they do. But the reality is, the school is trying to send a message that it's the school first and the football program second. The school will say, yes, we thank the football program for the millions of dollars it generates every year. But we're Penn State University, not Football U. So, in my opinion, whoever they hire, it doesn't matter who he is going to be given the hardest job in the world. He has to restore the university's name, then restore the football program. And if this Mr. O'Brien is the man to restore Penn State's name and then restore the football program second, more power to him. And we'll be back on 89.7 KLAS FM after this message.